So we're looking at the book of Proverbs, a book of wisdom, one of several books of wisdom. During the Lenten season, the prayer list that we had divided up many of the requests into different topics, and one of them was the topic of wisdom. And I'm always delightfully and prayerfully amazed when prayer requests come through, just asking for wisdom or asking for more of God's Spirit. And there's one request that came through. It said, please pray for God to guide me and show me wisdom in preparing and executing the next steps in my life. This is a Solomon-type prayer request, praying for wisdom to make the right decisions when embarking on a major journey in life. And this should be the prayer for each one of us as well, wherever life leads us. Solomon was becoming king when he offered up this same prayer, and God granted him wisdom beyond measure. He wrote down many of his divine insights into life to serve as a guide, not only for his generation, but for future generations. And many of those insights are captured here in the book of Proverbs. And we'll take a look at a few of them now. This is how the book opens up. Proverbs chapter 1, just the first few verses. It says, "These are the wise sayings of Solomon, David's son, Israel's king, written down so we'll know how to live well and right, to understand what life means and where it's going. A manual for living, for learning what's right and just and fair, to teach the inexperienced the ropes and give our young people a grasp on reality. There's something here also for seasoned men and women, still a thing or two for the experienced to learn, fresh wisdom to probe and penetrate the rhymes and the rhythms and reasons of wise men and women." Over the next several weeks, we'll look at specific words of wisdom on family, friends, finances, and other topics. But today, we'll lay the foundation for getting started in life, or repairing the foundation for those who've already started. We'll look at 3 layers to this foundation. Start with God and shun evil. Keep learning. And then trust in God and not in yourselves. So the first layer, Proverbs chapter 1, just beginning at verse 7, it says right out, and for most of these verses I'll read from the Message translation, and I'll note when I switch over to another version, but all of these will be from the Message. It says, verse 7, "Start with God. The first step in learning is bowing down to God. Only fools thumb their noses at such wisdom and learning." And if we go to verse 10, it says, "Dear friend, if bad companions tempt you, don't go along with them. If they say, 'Let's go out and raise some hell, let's beat up some old man, mug some old woman, let's pick them clean and get them ready for their funerals, we'll load up on top quality loot, we'll haul it home by the truckload, join us for the time of your life, with us it's share and share alike,' oh friend, don't give them a second look. Don't listen to them for a minute. They're racing to a very bad end, hurrying to ruin everything they lay hands on. Nobody robs a bank with everyone watching, yet that's what these people are doing. They're doing themselves in. When you grab all you can get, that's what happens. The more you get, the less you are." And so he says, start with God. And you have to ask yourself, are these so-called friends going to draw me away from God or draw me closer? If they're going to draw you away, cut them loose. And that verse 19, again, it says, when you grab all you can get, that's what happens. The more you get, the less you are. And that's really stunning to me. The less you are, the less happy, less joy, less all the good things, the less you are. And this harkens back to 1 Timothy 6:10. It says, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And so you become less of who you are, less of a person, but you gain more grief, more pain, more sorrow. And when Solomon got his first job, he consulted God, not his friends. He made a special effort to go to a sanctuary and worship, and he ended up having a spiritual encounter with God. And he prayed, and this is in 1 Kings chapter 3. He prayed in verse 6, you were extravagantly generous in love with David, my father, and he lived faithfully in your presence. His relationships were just and his heart right, and you have persisted in this great and generous love by giving him, and this very day, a son to sit on the throne. That's the beginning of his prayer, but those who were with us during Thursday nights will have to kind of scratch our heads and say, what? Wow! His perception, Solomon's perception of his father is much different than that of his older brothers, of Amnon, Absalom, and Adonijah, those who disregarded David's concerns or any desire to serve God, and raped his half-sister, Absalom, who tried to dethrone David, and the same with Adonijah. They could care less about their father. And Solomon is saying, he's faithful to you, and you poured out your love to him. David, he didn't take time to train those elder sons in the way of the Lord, and to his detriment, he let them run wild. He was either too busy fighting battles or too busy womanizing. And as a result, David allowed his family to degenerate into a disaster. But by the time Solomon came along, he took time to build up a relationship with his son and passed on words of wisdom to him. So Solomon saw a different side of David than his older brothers did. And even on his deathbed, David gave Solomon some sound advice. He said, do what God tells you. Walk in the paths he shows you. Follow the life map absolutely. Keep an eye out for the signposts, his course for life set out in the revelation to Moses. Then you'll get on well in whatever you do and wherever you go. In other words, start with God. And when Solomon ascends to the throne, this is exactly what he does. He starts with God and he shuns evil. And this is in his prayer in 1 Kings 3:7. He says, and now here I am at the worship service having an encounter with God. He says, and now here I am. God, my God, you have made me your servant, ruler of the kingdom in place of David, my father. I'm too young for this, a mere child. I don't know the ropes, hardly know the ins and outs of this job. And here I am, set in the middle of the people you've chosen, a great people, far too many to ever count. Here's what I want. Give me a God-listening heart so I can lead your people well, discerning the difference between good and evil. For who on their own is capable of leading your glorious people? Solomon is totally different than his older brothers. But the path forward should be the same regardless. Just because you had a bad relationship with your father, that's no excuse to run off with the wrong crowd. Yes, the prison population is full of young men who had no fatherly role models. But that's no excuse to do the wrong thing. It's all the more reason to start your life with God and shun evil. And if you've really started life and forgot God, start anew with him. And if you don't have a role model, still start your life with God and shun evil. If you're getting conflicting advice or any advice, start with God and shun evil. And because this was Solomon's prayer, God gave him more. God said, as a bonus, I'm giving you both the wealth and glory you didn't ask. There's not a king anywhere who will come up to your mark. So start off in life with God, shun evil, and he'll provide what you need. The second layer of this foundation is to keep learning. As Solomon writes, attune your ears to the world of wisdom. Set your heart on a life of understanding. Set your heart on a life of understanding. That's right. If you make insight your priority and won't take no for an answer, searching for it like a prospector, panning for gold, like an adventurer on a treasure hunt, believe me, before you know it, fear of God will be yours. You'll have come upon the knowledge of God. Now let's just skip down to verse 10. He personifies these qualities. He says, Lady Wisdom will be your close friend, and brother Knowledge your pleasant companion. Yeah. Good sense will scout ahead for danger. Insight will keep an eye out for you. They'll keep you from making wrong turns or following bad directions of those who are lost themselves and can't tell a trail from a tumbleweed. These losers who make a game of evil and throw parties to celebrate perversity. Traveling paths that go nowhere, wandering in a maze of detours and dead ends. Amazing. Solomon was granted wisdom, but he never stopped developing it and applying it to gain more and more knowledge and understanding. It was as if his eyes were just open, and everywhere he looked, he could see God and understand his ways. It was a lifelong journey for him, and he kept journaling, kept observing, always jotting down godly insights. And in 1 Kings 4, it says, God gave Solomon wisdom, the deepest of understanding and the largest of hearts. There was nothing beyond him, nothing he couldn't handle. Solomon's wisdom outclassed the vaunted wisdom of wise men of the East, outshone the famous wisdom of Egypt. Yes, he was wiser than anyone on the face of the earth, and we still refer to the wisdom of Solomon today. It says he created 3,000 proverbs. His songs added up to 1,005. He knew about plants, from the huge cedar that grows in Lebanon to the tiny hyssop that grows in the cracks of a wall. He understood everything about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. And he would write about them, about the ant, the lion, the bear, the dog, the ocean. There was a lesson from God in everything that he saw. And the emissaries from the world over came to hear his wisdom. And one was the Queen of Sheba, who came with great fanfare, marching into Jerusalem with her entourage just to test his intelligence and wisdom. And she did. And she came to this conclusion in 1 Kings 10:4. It says, when the Queen of Sheba experienced for herself Solomon's wisdom, and saw with her own eyes the palace he had built, the meals that were served, the impressive array of court officials and sharply dressed waiters, the lavish crystal and the elaborate worship extravagant with whole burnt offerings at the steps leading up to the temple of God, it took her breath away. She said to the king, it's all true. It's all true. your reputation for accomplishment and wisdom that reached all the way to my country is confirmed. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it for myself. They didn't exaggerate such wisdom and elegance, far more than I could ever have imagined. On the prayer retreat, I was surprised sitting at the dinner table, and a member brought up the topic about the controversy about the first president of the Continental Congress. In other words, the controversy about the first black man who was president of these United States, the black man whose picture we see on the back of a $2 bill. If you have a $2 bill, look on the back, you'll see a black man there. Controversy, he's the first president of these United States. At dinner, the controversy forced us to keep digging, to keep learning, keep Googling. Is this true or not? Keep researching. Which Hanson is this? Who is this person? But the bottom line is we should never consider ourselves too old to learn. And by proving to yourself that gaining more knowledge, more and more knowledge, and more understanding, and following wise counsel, just coming to that conclusion, proving to yourself that all that will save us from many dangers in life will come to appreciate and believe that God's word is true and that his word is truth. The last layer of this foundation is don't assume that you know it all. In Proverbs 3, starting in verse 5, it says, trust God from the bottom of your heart. Don't try to figure out everything you own. Listen for God's voice in everything you do. Everywhere you go, he's the one who will keep you on track. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. When Solomon was well established, he departed from the ways of the Lord. And he spent more time womanizing than in raising his family, just like his father did. So he missed the danger signs lurking within his own kingdom. And because now the morally weakened, the morally corrupt Solomon was his own son's role model. His own son, Rehoboam, missed the signs too and became the extreme example of his father. And when Solomon died and the son ascended to the throne, the people who had been suffering under Solomon came to him with a proposition. They said, give us some relief and we'll serve you and you'll be our king. These were the residents of the 10 tribes of the north, whose parents and grandparents had been loyal to King Saul and never really gelled well with the other 2 tribes. But this was the golden opportunity to seal the deal. Neither Solomon nor Rehoboam realized how deep the division still existed between the red states and the blue states. So Rehoboam said he needed time to think about it. But the choice was very simple, to be compassionate or to be cruel. He took 3 days to think it over, to talk it over with his father's advisors. And they said, you have to be compassionate and they'll do anything for you. Then he talked it over with his own buddies and they said, you have to double down and be cruel. And Rehoboam chose to be cruel. And he told those gathering from the tribes of the north, if you think life under my father was hard, you haven't seen the half of it. My father thrashed you with whips. I'll beat you bloody with chains. So totally unlike his father, who sought wisdom to lead, Rehoboam took the opposite approach. And it says when all Israel realized the king hadn't listened to a word they'd said, They stood up to him and said, "Get lost, David. We've had it with you, son of Jesse," talking to Solomon. "Let's get out of here, Israel, and fast. From now on, David, mind your own business." And with that, they left. And with those words, the kingdom of David, the kingdom that David and Solomon had built from the ground up, was instantly destroyed, never to regain its glory. This is how bad decisions are made, relying on your own understanding. What's the better approach? The better approach is to pray, "Here I am, God. I'm too young to embark on this journey all by myself. I don't know the ropes, hardly know the ins and outs of this job. And here I am, set down in the middle of this new beginning, and I don't know which way to go. So many choices, so many people telling me so many different things. Here's what I want. Give me a God-listening heart so I can make the right decision, discerning the difference between good and evil. For who on their own is capable of leading their lives without you?" Start with God and shun evil. Keep learning. Trust in God and not in yourselves. Amen. There may be one who would like to start on this path. They have a journey to take in front of them, and they need wisdom. Now is the time.